My name is Eveline, 20 years old. The kitchen reeked of fried onions and the stale smoke of my father's unending cigarettes. It was the same air I'd grown up choking on, a haze that clung to the curtains, the walls, even the pores of my skin. He sat at the head of the table, his beer balanced lazily on the swell of his belly, his expression already soured before I'd even spoken. My mother leaned against the counter with her arms folded, lips curled in that sly smirk she wore whenever she expected me to embarrass myself. My brother Shawn sprawled across the couch, one leg dangling, thumbs flicking across his phone. He chuckled at some video, the sound grating, like a reminder that he lived untouched by worry. In my hands, the papers trembled. Acceptance letters, financial aid notices, tuition breakdowns. They were creased now from how tightly I'd been holding them all afternoon, like maybe if I pressed hard enough, they'd carve their importance into my family's skin. I cleared my throat, already cracking before I could steady myself. "Dad," I began, my voice thin. "The deadline for my college payment is next week. I need to put down at least part of the tuition. I was hoping you could help. Even half would." The room went quiet, a silence so heavy it pressed into my ribs. Shawn broke it with a snort, not even glancing up from his phone. "Why don't you quit whining and get a job at a diner? People like you don't belong in college anyway." His voice carried the smugness of someone who knew he'd never have to beg for anything. I ignored him, my eyes fixed on Dad. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing, the creases in his forehead deepening, like each one had been carved by years of resentment. "You think we're made of money?" His voice was a low growl. "You think after feeding you, putting a roof over your head, I'm going to waste cash on some piece of paper that says you're smart?" My grip on the letters tightened until they crumpled further. "It's not a waste. It's my future. If I don't go now, That's when it happened. He stood, slow and deliberate, like a predator stretching before the kill. Each step toward me made my throat close tighter. Then, without warning, his elbow drove into the side of my neck. Pain exploded, sharp and searing, knocking the air from my lungs. I gasped, stumbling against the counter, white spots flashing in my vision. The letters scattered from my hands, fluttering to the grimy linoleum like scraps of trash. "Brains are wasted on trash," he growled above me, his shadow long and suffocating. My hand flew to my throat, fingers trembling as I tried to draw breath. My mother's laugh cut through the fog, shrill and cruel, sharper than the blow. "Look at her now," she said, her eyes gleaming with amusement. "She finally matches what she is, a 0, exactly what I told you she'd be." Shawn grinned, finally glancing up from his phone long enough to toss a potato chip into his mouth. "Guess college solved itself." Tears blurred my vision. I couldn't speak. The pain in my neck strangled the words. All I could do was crawl, my knees dragging on the cold tile as I gathered the scattered papers. Their laughter filled the kitchen, each note a nail hammered deeper into my chest. "Pick it all up, girl," Dad barked, kicking one of the letters across the room. "That's all you'll ever be good for, picking up scraps." I moved like a ghost, my body bent low, collecting the papers that had once symbolized freedom. My hands shook so badly I could barely fold them back together. Each breath burned. Each sound of their laughter carved deeper humiliation into my bones. But beneath the humiliation, something else stirred. I pressed the crumpled letters to my chest, their edges sharp against my skin. My throat still throbbed, my eyes stung with tears, but there was a fire in me now, a steady, dangerous flame. They thought they had broken me. They thought this was the end of my begging. They were wrong. That night, I didn't sleep. The bruises pulsed with every heartbeat, an ache that refused to let me forget. In the cracked bathroom mirror, I saw the swelling on my neck, purple blooming under the skin like poison ivy. For a moment, shame rose. Then, unexpectedly, it withered. Behind my swollen reflection, I saw something else flickering in my own eyes, a dark determination. They wanted me down here, crawling on the floor, begging for scraps. But as I traced my fingers along the bruise, a vow solidified inside me. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The house groaned with drunken snores from the living room couch, my mother's soft hum of contentment, my father's guttural snores, Shawn's careless laughter, echoing in memory. They thought I would always play the part of the family's punching bag. But that night, I whispered to the silence, my voice raspy from the blow. "They'll regret every word. every laugh, every bruise. I swear it. Morning came. Sunlight sneaking in through the torn curtains. My neck stiffened with every movement, so I pulled my hoodie high to hide the bruise. At school, no one asked about my voice, still strained, or why I flinched when I turned my head too quickly. No one ever asked. I was too skilled at pretending, too practiced at swallowing pain whole. But inside, I wasn't pretending anymore. Inside, something had shifted. At home that evening, the air was thick with cigarette smoke again. Shawn sprawled across the couch, laughing about some video. "Dad's putting down the deposit this week," he bragged to Mom. 10 grand on a Mustang. Imagine me rolling up to the wedding with that. Everyone will know who the favorite is. Mom beamed with pride, her eyes flicking toward me as I stepped through the doorway. "You deserve it, honey," she said sweetly. Then, with venom in her gaze, "Unlike some people in this house." I kept my face blank, my steps steady, though my pulse thundered in my ears. Dad stumbled in later, reeking of beer, waving a folded slip of paper. "Guess what, Shawn boy? Put down the deposit today. You'll be driving that car before the summer's out." He slapped the receipt onto the table, pride swelling his chest. Shawn whooped, leaping to his feet. "Thanks, Dad. At least you're not wasting it on trash." The word, trash, echoed through me again, rattling inside my skull like a stone in a jar. My fists clenched inside my sleeves until my nails carved half moons into my palms. Trash. I slipped into the hallway, my body trembling. 10,000 for Shawn's toy, not a cent for my future. Their laughter followed me down the corridor, but this time I didn't crumble. This time I let the fire burn hotter, hotter still. Because I already knew, if they wouldn't give me a future, I would take one from them. And I would make them choke on it. The bruise on my neck deepened over the next few days, darkening into a purple ring that pulsed with every heartbeat. It was like carrying their mark on me, a brand of humiliation I couldn't scrub away no matter how hard I tried. I kept my hoodie zipped high, tugging at the fabric whenever anyone's eyes lingered too long at school. Not that anyone really looked. Teachers droned, classmates gossiped, and I drifted through the halls invisible, clutching my notebooks tighter than necessary, as though the pages were armor. No one asked about my stiff movements, about why my voice was hoarse, about why I wouldn't lift my chin. No one ever did. I had learned early to perfect the mask, to smile faintly, to nod in the right places, to laugh when others laughed. Pretend hard enough, and the world never notices you're drowning. But I noticed every second. That evening, when I pushed open the door to our house, the smell of cigarette smoke and cheap beer swirled around me again, clinging like a curse. Shawn was in the living room, his legs stretched arrogantly across the armrest of the couch, holding his phone in one hand and tossing a small football in the other. His voice carried, full of easy laughter. "Dad's putting down the deposit this week," he bragged, grinning at Mom, who was perched on the recliner with her nail polish bottle open. 10 grand on a Mustang. Can you imagine me rolling up to the wedding in that? Everyone's going to know who the favorite is. I froze in the doorway, the words hitting me harder than any elbow. $10,000. My tuition was less than that. The future I was begging for, dismissed as worthless, cost less than his shiny toy car. Mom's face lit up with pride, her smile soft and indulgent. "You deserve it, honey," she said warmly, not once looking in my direction. Her eyes flicked briefly toward me then, sharp as glass, and her smile twisted. "Unlike some people in this house." Her voice carried no hesitation, no shame in the cruelty. It was casual, like she was commenting on the weather. I swallowed, my throat still raw from the bruise, and stepped further into the room. I wanted to scream that I deserved it too, that I'd worked harder, studied longer, bled myself dry to prove I was more than what they claimed. But I didn't, not this time. I stayed silent, slipping past, the weight of their words pressing into my ribs. Dad came in a little later, the front door slamming against the wall. He smelled like gasoline and sweat, his boots heavy on the worn linoleum. He held a folded slip of paper in one hand, waving it in the air like a trophy. "Guess what, Shawn boy? Put down the deposit today. You'll be driving that Mustang before summer's out." He slapped the receipt down on the coffee table with a grin. Shawn whooped, leaping from the couch and slapping Dad on the back. "Thanks, Dad. At least you're not wasting it on trash." The word echoed, always the same word. Trash. It rattled through me, bouncing off every corner of my mind. My nails dug crescents into my palms. I stood there in the hallway, watching the three of them glow in their moment of triumph. For a heartbeat, I felt like a ghost in my own house, as if I had already been erased. But I wasn't erased, not yet. I backed away quietly, my footsteps careful on the creaking floorboards. Their laughter trailed after me, ringing like a taunt. I shut my bedroom door and pressed my forehead to the wood. My chest heaved, anger rising hot enough to burn. 10,000 for Shawn's car, not a dime for my education. I pulled my hoodie tighter, my fingers brushing the bruise on my neck. The pain sent a wave of clarity through me. They weren't just careless, they were predictable. Careless with their money, careless with their secrets, careless with their cruelty. They thought nothing could touch them because nothing ever had. But that would change. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the shadows shifting with the streetlights outside. My ears strained for the sounds of their voices. Dad's drunken ramblings about work, about smart little tricks to earn extra cash. Mom's hushed phone calls, her laughter as she bragged about selling old clothes online, unreported. Shawn's arrogance spilling from every word when he thought no one was listening. I began to listen differently now, not just as the daughter they dismissed, but as an observer, a collector. Every laugh, every boast, every slip of the tongue. They didn't know it yet, but they were handing me weapons. The next morning, Dad sat at the table nursing his hangover, grumbling about how idiot foremen never notice a thing. He bragged about skimming extra cash from jobs, padding the numbers, pocketing what no one would miss. He said it loud enough for Shawn to laugh, loud enough for Mom to smirk, loud enough for me to memorize. I didn't look up from my cereal. I stirred the spoon slowly, my expression blank, but inside my mind was whirring, recording every detail. Shawn leaned back in his chair, feet propped arrogantly on another. "Easy money," he said, smirking. "Like the insurance payout last year. You remember that, Dad? One little fake fall, a couple of fake doctor notes, and bam, $5,000. They all laughed. The sound turned my stomach. Mom adjusted her blouse, smoothing the fabric with her manicured hands. People say stealing is wrong, but if the system's stupid enough to let you cheat it, why not? That's just being clever. Her tone was smug, almost proud, like they weren't criminals. They were geniuses. I kept my head down, but every word etched itself into me. Clever. Clever enough to steal. Clever enough to cheat. Clever enough to laugh while their daughter sat invisible. I rose from the table quietly, carrying my bowl to the sink. Dad didn't notice. Shawn had already pulled out his phone again. Mom was humming, distracted by her reflection in the toaster's chrome surface. None of them saw the look in my eyes as I turned away, the small, sharp smile I let slip for just a moment. They thought I was weak because I stayed silent. They thought invisibility meant irrelevance. But invisibility was power. Because you can't defend yourself against an enemy you don't see coming. And for the first time I realized they never saw me at all. Nights in that house were the worst. The walls were thin, the ceilings creaked, and every sound carried like whispers in a graveyard. I often lay awake, staring at the hairline cracks in my ceiling, listening to the chorus of my family's vices. Dad's guttural snores, punctuated by drunken grunts, Mom's soft murmurs into the phone, always secretive, always laughing like she had the upper hand, and Shawn's endless late-night calls with friends, bragging about his Mustang that hadn't even arrived yet. That night, though, I couldn't just lie there. The anger swelled in me like a tide, restless and dangerous. I pulled the acceptance letters from under my pillow and carried them to the kitchen. The house was dark except for the hum of the refrigerator light, pale and cold. I spread the wrinkled papers across the counter, smoothing them with my hands. They were torn, creased, but still alive. Acceptance, tuition, deadlines, words that promise freedom. If only I could break the chains of this house. My throat ached as I whispered to the silence. If I can't have their support, I'll take something else. Something they can't laugh off. I found an old spiral notebook in my drawer, its cover faded, corners chewed from years of neglect. It had belonged to Shawn once, filled with half-finished doodles and obscene jokes. I tore out the first pages, shredding his scribbles into the trash, and claimed it for myself. That night became the start of my ritual. Every time Dad let his tongue slip in a drunken boast, I wrote it down. Skimmed 200 off the books today. Idiots don't know a thing. Every time Mom bragged about her online resales, cash never declared, small enough she thought no one cared, I logged it carefully. Every time Shawn laughed about faking a limp to get an insurance payout, I etched it into the notebook like carving his arrogance into stone. Times, dates, names, places. I recorded them all, my handwriting sharp and deliberate, each word a bullet I could one day fire. When I finished, I slid the notebook under a loose floorboard beneath my bed, covering it carefully. I pressed my palm to the wood and felt calmer than I had in weeks. For once, I wasn't powerless. For once, I wasn't just their punching bag. I was dangerous, and they didn't even know it. But the house reminded me quickly of who they believed I was. 2 nights later, as I crept down the hallway, I heard my mother's voice from the kitchen sink. She was washing dishes, the water running loud. "Should have smashed her whole head in," she muttered with a chuckle, clinking plates against porcelain. Dad grunted from the table, where the flicker of a muted TV lit his face. "Would have saved us all the whining." Shawn laughed so hard he spilled his soda on the rug. Then I'd have the whole room to myself. Problem solved. I stood there in the shadows, clutching the notebook hidden beneath my hoodie, my chest tightening until it hurt. For a moment, I wanted to storm in, to scream, to throw the glass from the counter into their faces. But I didn't. I inhaled slowly, letting their words carve deeper, memorizing every syllable. I didn't cry this time. I didn't break. I just listened, stored it away, and thought ammo. Sometimes the memories of past humiliations bled into these nights. I remembered being 12, standing in the backyard with an old spelling bee ribbon clenched in my fist, daring to show Dad I'd won. He took one look, snatched it out of my hand, and used it to light his cigarette. "Paper's good for one thing," he said, exhaling smoke in my face. Shawn had laughed so hard he fell to the ground, clutching his stomach. Mom clapped her hands, telling me I shouldn't get too big for my britches. I remembered being 16, saving up tips from babysitting to buy my first used laptop. Within a week, Shawn had taken it to his room and claimed Dad gave it to him. When I complained, Mom slapped me across the cheek and hissed, "Stop making your brother look bad." Every scar, every humiliation, every moment where they forced me smaller than I was, they thought those things had been buried. But they lived in me, as sharp as broken glass. And now each entry in my notebook was stitching those shards together into a weapon. The days blurred. At school, I played the invisible girl, keeping my hoodie high and my answers short. At home, I was the silent observer, gathering secrets like a patient thief. Dad got bolder. He liked to talk when drunk, liked to brag about cheating the suits. Mom liked to remind us how clever she was, selling things through hidden accounts. Shawn liked to boast about his Mustang as if it were already parked in the driveway, bragging about how he'd take girls out for rides. None of them noticed how still I became, how my eyes never left them, how my hands were always tucked into the sleeves of my hoodie, clenched tightly around my growing determination. 2 weeks later, the final notice came from the college. Pay by Friday or lose your spot. I sat at the table when Dad walked in, the letter trembling in my hands. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. But that scene, his sneer, his hands tearing the paper in half, Mom clapping mockingly, Shawn dangling car keys in my face, would come soon. And when it did, I would no longer be the girl crawling on the floor, clutching scraps. Because now I had a notebook full of their sins, and I was ready to use it. The envelope from the college came on a Tuesday. It looked ordinary, pale cream, with my name typed neatly across the front. But I knew, before I even tore it open, that it carried the weight of a verdict. I sat at the kitchen table, the clock ticking above me, every second tightening the noose around my chest. My fingers shook as I unfolded the letter. Final notice. Payment required within 3 days. Failure to comply will result in forfeiture of admission. My future reduced to a deadline. The front door slammed. Dad's boots thudded heavily against the floor as he entered, the smell of sweat and beer announcing him before his voice did. "What's that?" he barked, eyeing the papers in my hands. I swallowed, forcing the tremor from my voice. "My tuition. It's due in 3 days. If I don't pay it, I lose everything." He stepped closer, his shadow stretching over the table. He plucked the letter from my hands without even reading it fully. His lips curled into a smirk. Then, with deliberate cruelty, he tore it clean in half. The sound, paper ripping, was louder than any scream I could have let out. He let the pieces flutter to the floor like fallen feathers. "You'll never be more than you are right now," he sneered, leaning close enough for me to smell the whiskey on his breath. "0. Behind him, Mom clapped her hands together, her laughter like knives. Bravo! Finally, she gets the message. Shawn strolled in, twirling his car keys, the metallic jingle sharp in my ears. He dangled them in front of my face. Hey, sis, if you're not too busy crying, want to come to see what a real investment looks like? His grin split his face, arrogant and cruel. The laughter rose again, a chorus of mockery that should have broken me. Any other time it might have. But this time, something different stirred. My chest rose, steady, my eyes lifting to meet each of theirs, one by one. Dad's smug smirk, Mom's gleeful contempt, Shawn's arrogant grin. Their laughter echoed, but it didn't drown me. It fueled me. And for the first time, I smiled. It wasn't wide, wasn't obvious, just a faint curl of my lips, small enough to seem almost accidental, but sharp enough to cut the air. The laughter faltered. Mom's smile wavered, just for a second. Shawn blinked, caught off guard. Even Dad's face twitched, confusion flickering through his drunken haze. It was only a moment, but it was enough. Because they didn't know what that smile meant. They thought it was madness, maybe, or denial. They couldn't see what I held behind it. The quiet, steady certainty that I had already gathered enough to destroy them. I bent down slowly, gathering the torn halves of the letter from the floor. My hands didn't tremble this time. I stacked the pieces neatly, as though nothing had happened. My smile lingered as I rose, meeting their eyes once more before slipping away down the hallway. In my room, I slid the torn paper beneath the floorboard, tucking it beside the notebook. The notebook was full now. Dates, names, scams, lies. And tonight, as I pressed my palm to the wood, I felt the pieces click into place. They thought tearing that letter ended my future, but all it did was seal theirs. That night, I lay awake listening to the house creak and groan, the voices drifting through thin walls. Dad ranting about idiot foremen at work, Mom humming while scrolling through her phone, Shawn bragging to a friend about his car deposit. They didn't know it yet, but every word they spoke was another thread in the noose tightening around them. The bruise on my neck still ached, the swelling now a sickly yellow-green, but I no longer touched it with shame. I touched it with purpose, a reminder, a mark not of weakness, but of the cost they would pay. By Friday, the deadline, they thought they'd buried my future. What they didn't know was that by Friday, I'd be ready to bury theirs. Friday arrived like a guillotine, my tuition deadline, the day my future was supposed to expire. The morning sun bled weakly through the blinds, striping my floor in gold, but there was no warmth in it. I sat on my bed with the notebook open in front of me, each page a loaded weapon. My hands hovered over the entries, tracing the ink like they were the edges of a blade. I hadn't paid a cent toward college. By now my place was already dissolving, my dreams slipping from reach. But strangely, I felt calm. Because instead of mourning what I had lost, I focused on what I was about to take. That morning, Dad left early, stumbling into his boots and muttering about a big side job. Mom was in the living room, painting her nails a garish red, humming off key. Shawn was outside, revving his friend's car just to hear the engine roar. None of them noticed the way I slipped out, the weight of my backpack heavier than usual. Inside it was the notebook and a flash drive. The drive had taken weeks to build, each recording stitched together from my phone, hidden in corners, capturing Dad's drunken boasts, how he skimmed extra cash from construction projects, how he fudged reports, how idiots in suits never caught on. His voice was sloppy, slurred, but damning. I walked fast, the city buzzing around me, my heart a drum in my chest. Each step toward his construction site felt like stepping off a cliff, but I kept going. Fear gnawed at me. What if his boss didn't believe me? What if he told Dad? What if I was walking straight into my own funeral? But then I thought of Dad's elbow slamming into my neck, of Mom's laughter, of Shawn dangling his keys in my face. My fear hardened into resolve. The sight was loud, the clang of metal and grind of machinery filling the air. Dust coated the ground, workers moved like ants, and in the middle of it stood Mr. Garrison, the site supervisor. He was a broad-shouldered man with thick glasses and a face weathered by years in the sun. He barked orders without looking at me until I stepped directly into his path. "You don't know me," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "but I know what my father's been doing with your money." He blinked, frowning. "Who the hell are you?" My name's Eveline, I said, pulling the flash drive and notebook from my bag. And this is proof. For a long moment, he just stared. Then curiosity, or suspicion, got the better of him. He snatched the notebook, flipping through quickly, his brow furrowing deeper with each page. I handed him the drive. There are recordings, too. Times, dates, everything. He looked up, his expression hardened into something dangerous. If this is true, his jaw tightened. He's finished. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. By the end of the day, the storm broke. When I returned home, Dad was already there, pacing the living room like a caged animal. His face was red, veins bulging at his temples. "Someone's trying to ruin me," he bellowed, slamming his fist against the wall so hard a picture frame rattled. "Garrison fired me, blacklisted me from half the city, said he had proof. Proof!" Mom rushed to him, her polished nails clutching his arm. "It's a mistake. It has to be. You'll fix it, won't you? You always fix things." But Dad only roared louder, kicking the coffee table until it tipped, beer bottles clattering across the floor. "They won't hire me anywhere. Someone's spreading lies, feeding them garbage." Shawn looked unsettled for the first time, though he tried to mask it with a smirk. "Maybe you pissed off the wrong guy, Dad. Happens." "Shut your mouth," Dad snapped, his eyes wild. "This is sabotage. Someone's out to get me." I stood in the doorway, clutching my backpack straps, my face carefully blank. Inside, though, I felt a current of satisfaction hum through me. He didn't know. None of them knew. The man who thought himself untouchable was unraveling, and I had pulled the first thread. As the shouting continued, I slipped quietly to my room. I pressed my ear to the floorboard where the notebook was hidden, as if I could hear the power humming inside. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like the hunter. And this was only the beginning. The house grew quieter after Dad lost his job, but not in a peaceful way. It was the silence of a storm building, heavy and sharp, like the air before lightning. He spent his days pacing, muttering curses under his breath, drinking earlier than ever. Mom fluttered nervously around him, trying to keep him calm, but even her patience frayed. I watched, I listened, and I waited. The next target was already clear. Mom thought she was untouchable, clever even. She sold Shawn's old clothes, Dad's forgotten tools, cheap jewelry from thrift shops. Reselling, she called it, laughing to herself about the cash she never declared. "The IRS doesn't care about small fish," she told Dad once, waving a wad of bills. "We're invisible." Invisible. That word stuck with me, because I knew better. I compiled the evidence quietly, screenshots of her listings, the bank transfers, the PayPal accounts under fake names. I mailed it all, neatly packaged, to the IRS. A coward might have hesitated, but I wasn't a coward anymore. It only took a week for the letter to arrive. Mom was sitting at the kitchen table when she opened it, Shawn leaning over her shoulder. Her polish-stained fingers trembled as she read the words, back taxes, penalties, threat of seizure. The color drained from her face, her lipstick suddenly too bright against her pallor. "What is this?" she whispered. Dad snatched the letter from her hands, his eyes scanning the lines. His face turned a dangerous shade of red. "You idiot," he spat. "You didn't report anything? You dragged us all into this?" "It was harmless," she shot back, her voice high and desperate. "Pennies compared to what you've stolen." The room fell silent, the words hanging like poison. Dad's glare sharpened, and for the first time I saw fear in Mom's eyes, not of the IRS, but of him. Shawn shifted uncomfortably, muttering, "Maybe you should have been more careful, Ma." Mom snapped her head toward him, her eyes blazing. "Oh, don't you dare lecture me. You and your fake insurance claims? If anyone's reckless, it's you." I stood in the doorway, quiet as ever, watching the cracks widen. My family, once united in cruelty, was splintering under the weight of their own sins, and I hadn't even pressed hard yet. That night, their voices rose through the thin walls, sharp and vicious. "You ruined us," Dad shouted. "You drank us into ruin long before this," Mom screamed back. Shawn tried to play peacemaker, but his voice shook. "Stop yelling. We'll figure it out. We always do." But they didn't sound like people who would figure it out. They sounded like people teetering on the edge of collapse. I lay in bed listening, my lips curved into that same faint smile. They had called me zero, trash, worthless. But zeros, I realized, weren't empty. Zeros multiplied. And I was multiplying their sins until they consumed them. The first thread had unraveled with Dad. Now the fabric itself was beginning to tear. And soon it would rip wide open. The Mustang arrived on a cloudless afternoon, its engine growling like a beast meant to be worshipped. Shawn strutted beside it, sunglasses on, his grin wide enough to split his face. Neighbors peeked through their blinds, some stepping onto porches to admire the shining red paint. He revved it over and over, basking in their attention like a king returning from conquest. I watched from the porch, arms folded, hoodie sleeves tugged down over my hands. His joy should have crushed me, but instead it sharpened my resolve, because I knew something he didn't. His little empire was about to collapse just like theirs. The recordings were already cued, his own voice bragging. Insurance fraud is easy, man. You just fake a fall, get a couple of bogus doctor's notes. $5,000, just like that. The company's too dumb to check. I sent the files to his insurer with a neat, anonymous email. Facts, dates, evidence. The same precision I had used on Dad and Mom. The storm came faster than I expected. 2 weeks later, a tow truck pulled up in front of our house. Shawn had just come out, polishing the car hood with a rag, when the driver stepped out. Repossession, the man said flatly, handing Shawn a notice. Shawn laughed, incredulous. You've got the wrong house, man. This is my car. Paid for, cash deposit, check again. The driver shook his head, already hooking chains to the wheels. Fraud investigation. This one's gone. I will never forget Shawn's face as realization sank in. The color drained, his jaw fell slack, and then he erupted, shouting, cursings, grabbing at the chains like a child trying to hold on to a toy being taken away. Stop! You can't take this, he screamed, barefoot now, chasing as the truck pulled away. His voice cracked, desperation spilling into the street. Neighbors gathered at their windows, some whispering, some smirking. The golden boy finally slipped, I heard Mrs. Callahan mutter to another neighbor, her voice carrying across the yard. Humiliation wrapped itself around Shawn like chains. He stood in the middle of the street, chest heaving, hands shaking, while the Mustang disappeared down the road. His dream, his pride, stripped in front of everyone. From the porch, I watched silently, my arms still folded. His humiliation was complete, but something deeper churned beneath my calm exterior, a satisfaction so sharp it bordered on dangerous. That night, Shawn's fury had nowhere to go. He stormed into the house, his face red, eyes wild. Someone set me up, he shouted, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. Someone sent them that recording. Who the hell knew about it? Mom's face paled. Recording? What recording? Dad, slumped in his chair with a beer, groaned. Don't tell me you were dumb enough to run your mouth. I wasn't dumb, Shawn cut him off, pacing like a caged lion. Then his eyes darted to me. I froze in the hallway, clutching my notebook, hidden under my hoodie. For the first time, I saw suspicion flicker across his face. His stare lingered too long, sharp and accusing. You, he said slowly, you're always listening, always lurking around. You did this, didn't you? The room went still. I forced myself to meet his eyes, my expression calm, almost bored. Why would I ruin you? You're all Mom and Dad ever talk about. His mouth opened, then closed. Arrogance warred with paranoia in his gaze. I tilted my head slightly, letting the corner of my mouth curl upward in that faint smile. It was enough to make him falter, doubt himself. Don't be stupid, Shawn, Mom snapped, rushing to his side. Your sister couldn't pull this off if she tried. Think about it. Who really has it out for you? Probably someone at the insurance company. Her dismissal was sharp, absolute, and Shawn, desperate to believe he was still untouchable, latched onto it. His suspicion ebbed, replaced by more anger at faceless enemies. But I saw it, the hesitation, the moment he almost knew. And it thrilled me. Later, as I slipped back into my room, I pressed the notebook to my chest, breathing deeply. One by one, the pillars of their pride were collapsing. Dad's job, Mom's schemes, Shawn's car. And still, they underestimated me. Still, they thought I was nothing, which meant they hadn't yet realized the truth. I was the one holding the knife. Exactly 1 week after Dad's elbow struck my neck, I cooked dinner. The kitchen filled with the unfamiliar scent of roast chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, and gravy. Real food, not the greasy takeout boxes or reheated leftovers we usually survived on. The smell curled through the house, rich and tempting, drawing them in like moths to flame. I set the table carefully, plates polished, silverware aligned, glasses filled with water that sparkled under the light. The sight alone made them uneasy. My mother leaned against the doorway, her arms crossed. "What's this?" she asked, suspicion dripping from her voice. "Dinner," I said simply, basting the chicken one last time. Dad lumbered in next, sniffing the air. "Since when do you play house?" His tone was mocking, but I noticed the way his eyes darted to the food, hungry despite himself. Shawn was the last, slumping into his chair, his face still sullen from the repossession. He glanced at me, narrowed his eyes, then looked away. The three of them sat, uncertain, their plates full, but none of them lifting a fork. The silence stretched, thick and tense. "A celebration?" Mom sneered finally. "Since when do you—" "Since tonight," I cut her off, my voice calm but sharp. Her eyes narrowed. I sat down across from them, folding my hands neatly on the table. "I decided to feed you one last meal before you starve." For a moment, the only sound was the ticking clock on the wall. Then Shawn laughed nervously, trying to shake off the unease. "What's that supposed to mean?" I reached into my hoodie pocket and pulled out 3 envelopes, thick, white, weighted with ruin. I laid them on the table, one by one, like cards in a game. Dad snatched his first, ripping it open with a grunt. His eyes scanned the letter, and for the first time, I saw the color drain from his face. Termination notice. Fraud reports. Blacklisted from multiple firms. His hands shook as he crumpled the paper, veins bulging at his temples. Mom's turn. She tore hers open, her eyes widening as she read the words. IRS audit. Back taxes. Penalties. Asset seizure warnings. The letter trembled in her manicured hands, her nail polish streaking against the paper. Shawn ripped his envelope apart, his breath catching. Insurance fraud charges. Repossession notice. Canceled policy. His face collapsed, disbelief etched in every line. The room went dead silent. I leaned forward, my voice steady, low, deliberate. "You called me zero. Trash, worthless. But zeros multiply. And I multiplied every one of your sins until you became nothing." Dad slammed his fist on the table, the plates rattling. "You think you can destroy this family?" His voice cracked with rage. I met his eyes without flinching. "You already did. I just made sure the world could see it." Mom reached across the table, her hands trembling, her polish smearing against my sleeve. "Please, you wouldn't. Not to us. You're our daughter." I pulled back slowly, letting a cold smile spread across my face. I already did. Shawn's fork clattered onto his plate. His mouth opened, but no sound came. He looked like a boy stripped bare in front of his schoolyard bullies. No arrogance left, only shame. The 3 of them sat there, ruined, while the feast I'd prepared cooled untouched. The roast glistened, the potatoes steamed, but none of them moved. Their eyes stayed locked on the envelopes, their lives unraveling faster than they could comprehend. I rose quietly, the chair scraping against the floor. None of them stopped me. None of them could. I walked toward the door, my steps calm, deliberate. Behind me, Mom began to sob, a broken, jagged sound. Dad cursed, the words disjointed, powerless. Shawn muttered, "This can't be happening," his voice small, childlike. But I didn't turn back. I opened the door and stepped into the night, the cool air filling my lungs like freedom. For the first time in years, my chest felt light. I had given them one last supper, and with it, I had left them starving on their own sins. The night swallowed me as I stepped off the porch, the air cool against my face. For once, the air didn't smell of smoke, or beer, or fried onions. It smelled clean, sharp, alive. Above me, the stars stretched endless, indifferent to the wreckage I had left behind. Behind the door, I could still hear them. My mother's sobs, brittle and jagged. My father's curses, loud at first, then collapsing into silence. Shawn's voice, broken and small, repeating the same words like a prayer. "This isn't real. This isn't real." I didn't pause. I didn't go back. I walked. Every step carried me further from the girl who had crawled on the kitchen floor, choking on their laughter. Every step carried me closer to someone else, someone colder, sharper. By the time I reached the edge of the street, I knew it wasn't enough to simply leave them with those envelopes. They had always hidden behind closed doors, behind smirks and cruelty no one else saw. Their cruelty had thrived in shadows, so I had dragged them into the light. Earlier that day, before the dinner, I had mailed copies of everything. To relatives, to neighbors, to colleagues. Pages of evidence, recordings, bank statements, all of it duplicated and sent with no return address. By morning, everyone who ever thought my family respectable would know the truth. Their name, their pride, their legacy, it would all rot. It should have filled me with satisfaction, and it did. But beneath the satisfaction, something else gnawed, a hollow echo in my chest. I paused beneath the streetlight, pulling my hoodie tighter. My hand rose unconsciously to my neck, fingers brushing the scarred skin where Dad's elbow had struck. The bruise was fading now, leaving only a faint mark. But I felt it still, deep inside, like an ember that would never die. That scar wasn't just his anymore. It was mine, a mark of survival, a mark of power. For so long they had called me Zero, a nothing, worthless. But tonight, as their world collapsed, I wondered if maybe they had been right in a way. Because zero doesn't just mean nothing. Zero erases, zero multiplies, zero consumes until there's nothing left. And I had become exactly that. I stopped in front of the mirror of a darkened storefront, catching my reflection in the glass. For a long moment, I just stared. The girl looking back wasn't the same Eveline who had begged at the kitchen table, clutching crumpled letters. Her eyes were darker now, sharper. Her mouth held that same faint smile she had shown her family, the smile that unsettled them because they couldn't understand it. I understood it now. It was the smile of someone who had burned her own past to the ground. A sudden gust of wind rustled through the street, scattering leaves across the pavement. Somewhere behind me, a siren wailed, distant but approaching. Maybe it was for them. Maybe it wasn't. Either way, it didn't matter. I turned away from the glass, my footsteps echoing on the empty street. My family had nothing left. Their pride, their secrets, their lies, gone. And me? I had my freedom. But freedom, I realized, wasn't clean. It wasn't pure. It was sharp, heavy, stained with the ashes of everything I had destroyed. Still, I didn't regret it. Because regret is for those who wish things had gone differently. And for me, there had never been another way. I walked on, the night swallowing me whole, my scar burning faintly like a reminder of what I'd lost and what I'd become. Maybe they were right to call me Zero. Because zero erases everything it touches. And now I was free.